So I've walked you through building this beauty we see right here. Then afterwards, I've walked you through cable management, how to and where to connect all the cables, and then how to make it look beautiful, not only to look beautiful, but so that you have the proper airflow to keep it nice and cool. Now, in this video, we're going to go over flashing the BIOS, basic BIOS configuration, because every single system is going to be a little bit different depending on your memory, CPU, and so many other factors. Then after that, we're going to go on to installing Windows and then installing all the drivers, doing some Windows updates and everything. So I literally have you from start to end, helping you on every single aspect of building a machine. Anyway, let's get started. First off, we're going to start with flashing the BIOS. I have a FAT32 formatted thumb drive with the BIOS on it. And if your system wasn't already on, go ahead, press the power button. But right now we have this message on the screen and I'm going to hit yes to reset the FTPM. Now that we've restarted the machine after hitting Y for FTPM, just start tapping the delete key to enter the BIOS. All right, now we're in the EVGA BIOS. So you can either navigate it with your mouse or keyboard. So come over here, then we'll go under extras. We'll go under BIOS update. The BIOS is named 1A579103.bin. I renamed it to BIOS dash just so that I knew. So I selected that. Then it asked me, do I want to update? So I click yes. This should only take a minute or so. Now, don't worry when the system restarts after the flash. That's completely normal, as long as it doesn't do it in the middle, because you might have another problem. But regardless of that, don't worry if it restarts. It's going to restart a few times. You're basically wiping all of its memory and then putting new memory in there, new updates. A lot of things are going to connect. It's meant to make it work better. So just wanted to clarify that for you. Then under CMOS, check some error. CPU and memory have changed. Yeah, you go ahead, just click yes. Then we'll go back under advanced configuration, enter setup. All right, now that we're in the BIOS, we'll go ahead and disconnect that thumb drive that had the BIOS on it and then plug in a thumb drive that has Windows 10 on it. You can leave, for the most part, everything stock if you'd like. You can come in here and change it all core per CCX, but for this video, we're going to leave that on auto. So then we're going to come over to memory. We're going to change the memory profile to XMP profile 1. So that's going to go ahead and set up the memory. We only have 3200 megahertz RAM, but it is incredibly low latency RAM. So later on we can go ahead and overclock it some, which at some point we will, just not in this video. Now we'll go under advanced, trusted computing, enable that you're going to need for Windows 11. Come out of here and then AMD FTPM configuration, erase TPM and V for factory reset. I'm going to go ahead. You never know what's going to happen. So I like security, but CPU configuration, we can go ahead and leave that all default for now. PCIe configuration, resizable bar support. We're going to go ahead and enable that so that on AMD we can utilize SAM or resizable bar. Above 4G decoding, leave that enabled as well. Speed by 16 Gen 4, that's for the video card. Auto works, but we're just going to go ahead and set it at Gen 4 anyway. Chipset configuration, that's just letting you know the chipset. Power management, dark mode. Now, I don't want dark mode on, but so we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 LEDs on the board. I'm marking them virtually as well on the video, just so that you could see this is with dark mode off. Let's go ahead, enable dark mode. Okay, now this is with dark mode off. I can only see, actually I don't see any of the LEDs on. So now with dark mode off, all those little points of light has been disabled on the motherboard. X570 Dark, the A6 and the power button, those are still on. That diagnostic A6 can be disabled in the BIOS though, and the X570 Dark can be disabled within the OS on ELEET, which I'll show you in a minute. Restore AC power loss, I always leave that off in case you have brownouts where the lights on, off, on, off, on, off. Your system is going to turn on, off, on, off, on, off. Restore AC power loss. When the lights come back on, no matter how many times they turn on and off, it'll stay off, protecting your system. ACPI sleep state, S3 only. USB configuration. I'll leave these all enabled. Now, one thing we could have done as well is up here, you notice there's a USB port. We could have also flashed the BIOS through that, but more conventional method is at the very front of the system, what you saw before. So coming out of here, SATA configuration, AHCI mode or RAID, we'll leave that as AHCI. Now I've already disconnected the SSD because I want to install on the M.2. So we're going to go ahead and come over here under onboard device configuration. We can enable or disable either one or both of the LAN ports. I'll leave them all enabled, as well as the audio. And then here is where we can enable, disable those M.2 ports on the board. If we wanted to for key E, we can disable the Wi-Fi adapter, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that enabled. HW monitor configuration. This is showing you the temperatures of everything on your machine. Now, since we are under pump, liquid cooling, it's set to smart. By select smart fan settings right here. And then here is where the Arctic Freezer 2 420 would be able to get its configuration. So I'm going to leave that at default for now. We can always play with it later. NVMe, that goes ahead and shows the NVMe M.2 drive we have connected now, so perfect. Now I'm going to go under boot up numlock, yep. Speaker beep, yep, that's the beep 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 post beep. I feel that's very important in case there's any issues. Fast boot, I typically like to disable this because I want it to go through all of the post as it's going through before it launches. Post stands for power on self-test, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave that on for this purpose. Make sure you're under boot mode select UEFI, not legacy. That's not only for the M.2, but that's also for resizable bar. So here is where you set up your boot order. Right now we have hard disk Windows Boot Manager because we already have an operating system on that M.2 SSD. But if there's no Windows Boot Manager, you won't see that there. So after you install Windows, you have to set that. So what you could do is, for example, you won't see it at first. You just install Windows on it. When you reboot and come back into the BIOS, before you start Windows, you go under UEFI hard disk BBS priority, and then select that M.2 Windows Boot Manager. This is the Sovereign or the Samsung. I disconnected the Samsung while we were in the BIOS, but the Sovereign is what we want. And then you'll see that appear here. Okay, CSM configuration, perfect. We don't want CSM enabled. So at this point, we'll go ahead. Actually, what I'll do here is UEFI USB key drive priorities. Okay, that's the thumb drive we have plugged in. So what I'll do here is, you see that thumb drive right here. I'm just gonna go ahead, bring that up, F10 to save and exit. Okay, so you heard the post beep, it did its power on self-test. We're booting off the thumb drive. So Windows 10 setup, 64-bit. Okay, so then here, Windows setup, we'll do English, US, and we'll do next, and now install now. I don't have a product key. And then we select our version of Windows, or the version that we have a key for. We'll do Windows 10 Pro, next. And make sure to read through all of this information. Click I accept, and next. We'll do a custom install. Now, if you've already had Windows on this drive before, you're going to see this. You're going to see a bunch of partitions. Now, mind you, what we're going to do now, doing this, we're deleting all those partitions so we can do a clean Windows install. If you wanted to keep all that information, you would copy it beforehand, but now we deleted all the partitions, drive 0 unallocated space, because we've also removed that other drive, and now we can select next. All right, so now at this point, we can either let it restart 10 seconds or restart it ourselves. Let's start with region. For me, United States, and yes. Keyboard layout, US, yes. Secondary layout, nah, skip. And let's connect to the network real quick, 1 sec. Let's go ahead and set up for personal use and click next. Now, you can either put in your email account or go offline account. I'll do offline. And then for this one, I'll choose limited experience. Now we're in Windows. We're good to go. In case you don't have Wi-Fi access, it's always best to copy all the drivers on a thumb drive before you install. That way you're not stuck on the desktop and you can't do anything. So we can open up Edge. Again, it's a brand new install. Then we'll go to EVGA.com. Then we'll click Service. Then we'll click Drivers and BIOS. Click Motherboard. Family. Choose the AMD X570. Part number, the only one right now, but it'll be 121-VR-A579. Type, let's do all. OS, Windows 10 for now, and submit. So we've already downloaded the BIOS. Originally we were at 101, we went up to 103. Now we won't download the RAID or the RAID drivers from EVGA since it's an AMD chipset. So we'll download the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Then we'll download Network Intel. We won't download the chipset driver, but we will download audio driver and audio driver EVGA new audio. So while that's downloading, we'll come up here, go to AMD.com, click on the little lines up here. Then we'll go to drivers and support. Scroll down a little bit. Then we'll select chipset AM4 X570 and click submit. Scroll down, select Windows 10 64-bit. Then we'll go ahead and download the latest chipset and the latest RAID installer and the latest RAID driver. So while that's downloading, I wanted to mention why I didn't download the chipset and the RAID drivers from EVGA. EVGA doesn't make the chipset and they don't make the RAID drivers. They make the motherboard, they buy the chipset from AMD. Just like any other motherboard manufacturer, the chipset always comes from AMD. So AMD is always going to have the latest driver. So it's always best to get it directly from them. So we're just going to go ahead and close out of everything and then open up File Explorer. We'll go to Downloads, then go ahead and grab the chipset software, copy this to the root. Okay, so then we'll just extract everything. Realtek Audio. And then while that's doing its thing, LAN, and then Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So the reason I copied the contents of those files to another directory is you don't install from within a zip file because the installer can't find the other stuff because it's inside of that zip. So I extract everything, delete the zips, and then we go on installing. Then we come back over here. First thing you always install is the chipset. Okay, leave that all selected and then we'll click install. I hate when it says this, restart required while it's still installing. Don't do that while it's still installing. Wait till it's done. Now we'll go ahead and click close here and then we'll restart manually. Come back into File Explorer, Downloads. On the motherboard is audio, so we'll go ahead and install that next. Yes. And every time it asks you to restart, make sure you finish the install and then manually restart. Don't skip a restart. It only takes a few seconds. Okay, yes, I want to restart, but we're going to select no, finish, and then manually restart. Then we will install the EVGA new. And I always disable UAC. I don't want it to ask me everything. And then install LAN. Next, I accept. Next, install. And finish. Then we come back here into Wi-Fi. We'll install the Bluetooth driver first. Next, I accept, and next. We'll do a custom. And then just to make sure all's good. Yep, and next, install. And even though we have Wi-Fi here already enabled, we're coming back in here into Wi-Fi because that's going to install the specific drivers, not a generalized driver set. Click Finish. Now, two things I forgot to download, so we'll go back into Edge. This time we'll go into NVIDIA.com. I forgot to download the video driver. So come over here, click on the three lines, drivers. We'll go under GeForce 30 series. We're using a 3080 Ti. Then we'll click search and download. And download again. So while it's doing its thing, we'll come over here back to EVGA.com. Under EVGA, we'll come under search ELEET X1, enter. Then we'll click EVGA ELEET X1. And then we'll go ahead and download the latest version, 1.0.7.0. You're gonna have a newer version by the time you see this. When that's done, we'll just close out of here. Now we'll go ahead and install the video driver. And agree and continue. Custom, perform a clean installation, and next. Now yes, this is the first time we've installed a video driver on this install, but I always choose clean because I wanted to get rid of all the Windows default. Sometimes I even go as far as using DDU on those drivers. I like to make sure everything's nice and clean to make sure we don't have any issues whatsoever. And when we're done here, we can just go ahead. I'm gonna uncheck launch, click close, and then we'll go to EVGA ELEET X1. We'll extract this. Even though on that one you don't really need to because it's only one file, but just to make sure. Next, I agree, install, and OK. So then we're gonna go ahead, open up EVGA ELEET. Now you'll notice the lights are going crazy right now. I was playing with it before we installed everything with the remote control that comes with the anodized lights. Over here, overclocking for the X570 Dark. Can overclock package per CCX. But here we have all of the information on the CPU, the core voltage, CPU specs, cores, max TDP, TJ max, clock speed, and memory speed. Then over here under monitoring, we have all of the voltages, temperatures, and fan RPMs. Then we have system, motherboard, CPU, memory, and then LED, that annoying thing blinking right now. So we could turn everything off if we wanted to. There we go. We have a little bit more sanity. Now, the GSkill is going to require its own program. So we're going to go ahead, turn everything back on. And if we don't like that breathing effect there, we can just come here, maybe change it to a rainbow. Or just static on. Then we can change the colors, enabling it all over here. It's cool the way it does it all active. So let's go ahead, back to rainbow. So then that's all going to sync right there. So now we'll go to GSkill, click on the three little lines up here. We'll go to support, download, DRAM, Trident Z Family RGB Neo Lighting Control Software. Click go to download, agree on that guy. Then we'll go ahead and download the latest version. And just copy it out of here. And we're going to need to restart, so let me just close out of everything here. No, and manually restart. And 1 second while I restart. When we're back in Windows, we can just open up the GSkill memory, the program, and then from here we can, let's say, change it to one color if we wanted to. Change it to all that color. Which I am kind of fond of that rainbow color it had. We can do breathing. Strobing. I'll probably select rainbow, just to help it match everything. And then now there is an external sync, but it seems to only sync with Razer Chroma. So I'm just going to go ahead now, close this, and now put this back on EVGA ELEET LED, and then we'll put this to rainbow, which unfortunately doesn't seem to match that, but it still works. Then let me go ahead and plug in that SSD real quick. Now, because we don't have hot plug enabled in the BIOS, we are going to have to restart in order for it to show up here. This is just a thumb drive. So we'll go ahead and restart. And then over here, we'll see our SSD. We've walked you through building the machine from the ground up, then cable management, and now installing Windows on it, flashing the BIOS, basic BIOS configuration, and even playing a little bit with the RGB LED. Unfortunately, the RAM doesn't want to sync up. It will only sync up with Razer Chroma, it seems. But still, you are given the option of changing that and EVGA ELEET. In a future video, we're going to be doing some overclocking and everything on this board through the BIOS and maybe a little bit through EVGA ELEET as well, since it can do everything. Now, I do want to mention, when I unplugged and plugged back in the SSD, I was doing data, I was not doing power. You don't want to play with power, especially while the machine's on. Data, since you are able to do hot plug, when you enable hot plug in the BIOS, when you plug it back in, even if you're in Windows, boom, it'll detect and it'll show up. So I should have probably enabled hot plug, but doesn't really matter too much on that. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, please do leave them down below. I respond to any and everything you may have. Any questions, comments, or concerns, I get back to all of them. As always, please do click like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. That way I can keep bringing you bigger and better videos just like this. And also, if you feel like I've helped you and you want to throw me a buck or two, go ahead, buy me a cup of coffee as well. Iggy with ThisBytesForYou up. See you guys.